Alright, good morning. How's everybody doing? Two things I want to talk about today. Maybe I think I'll make two separate videos. One is local and one is international. So I'll start with the local one. There's a forum tonight in Newburgh to discuss the rise in, or a supposed rise in bigotry and so forth in Orange County, New York. And there'll be participation from the Jewish Federation of Orange County and from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I'm not quite sure who else or what else. I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I have other things going on, and plus I have to go to bed early so I can get up and go to work. I don't have luxury to go and participate in these type of things. That being said, I did want to give my remarks, and so here I am. Now, there was an editorial in the Times Herald Record talking about Steve Newhouse and some scandal that, in as much that in a campaign commercial he showed a video of his opponent meeting with members of the Hasidic community, and that apparently, this was in order to get people on his side, to show that he's not the Hasidic candidate. However, the fact of the matter was, in Kiryas Joel you have 2 or 3 voting blocks. Generally, the followers of the chief rabbi there, Grand Rabbi, who's also the chief rabbi of the city, Rabbi Aaron Teitelbaum, who's the Satmar Rebbe from Kiryas Joel, and also the chief rabbi of the town. From a halachic standpoint, is Mar the Asra of the town. So so his followers, he doesn't make the decisions of who to support. It's Askanim, it's lay leaders who are more involved in politics. The Rebbe is not really involved in those things. He's involved in Torah, But among his followers, there are lay leaders who have, separate organizations that are political action committees that engage in endorsing local candidates. That's and then you have the other 2 main groups that these groups generally form various coalitions. So you have the 2 main groups that oppose Rabbi Aaron Teitelbaum. One are the followers of his brother, Rabbi Zalman Teitelbaum, who's the Satmar Rebbe in Williamsburg, and the other group are the B'nai Yoel, who felt that they don't need to have a Rebbe, which is true. They could just have their own congregations with their own rabbis. Often considered to be a dissident group, but if the matter is they also are more of an old guard. In many ways they're more extreme, I would say, more fundamentalist in many areas. They tend to have more affiliation with Alter Karta and other extremist groups, which extremist is not necessarily a bad thing in this case. If you're extreme to want to make peace, and but generally, that's just. But it's the fact of the matter that they do have affiliation, association with the more extreme elements, smaller meaning, and they tend to lend some credibility in a certain sense to these more more extreme elements. And again, I don't mean here extreme is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be, and it could not be. And I'm not making a statement here. I'm just talking in a sociological sense. So anyway, in general, the Bnei Yol and the followers of Rabbi Zalman are more or less unified in their voting bloc, and the followers of Rabbi Aaron are unified in their voting bloc. Sometimes all the voting blocs are on the same page, and sometimes they're not. As far as endorsements, and the thing is that the endorsements of the voting bloc doesn't mean that everybody's going to necessarily follow it. People do think for themselves, but for the most part, people will come to the conclusion that, especially a lot of times, it's a pretty black or white issue of, what the interests are of those particular communities, and so they come to conclusions on their own. For the most part, it's not just, there's this stereotype that they're just in a cult and they're blindly following whatever the rabbi says. So first of all, the rabbis are not the ones who make these decisions. These are decisions that are made by a committee of lay leaders of who to endorse. And as I've discussed in other videos discussing this issue of block voting in the Hasidic communities, which are often split into different communities, they're not as monolithic as people think. Like I just described, in Kiryas Joel, you do have these various groups that coalition together. Now, in the village of Kiryas Joel and the surrounding areas that will soon be incorporated into the town of Palm Tree, as much as I think that's a silly name. You have many independent synagogues, and generally those independent synagogues, which are not, the Satmar, they're not, they have their own rebbes. Among those, there'll also be, various coalitions. Certain synagogues will generally identify more with one side over the other. It's interesting to note that among the Bnei Yol, you also have many who oppose voting. And this is an interesting sociological. Not that there's a large group of these people, but there are individuals, particularly from the Bnei Yol, who oppose Jews participating in voting at all. Although sometimes they will vote just to counterbalance the votes from Rabbi Aaron's Hasidim. It's a fascinating bit of sociology that you can encounter in this 1 mile square radius of Orange County, New York. It's a very fascinating thing. Whatever your feelings are, and whatever, I personally, I try to stay away from politics. I have children both in Reb Aaron's school and in Reb Zalman Leib's school. I have friends in both, areas, and I'm not a Satmar Chassid. I generally identify myself as being independent. However, I have a Rebbe who I guess I would consider to be my Rebbe more than other Rebbes, although I do go to a lot of other Rebbes. And that Rebbe is a Hungarian Rebbe, who has friendly relations with both sides. I think he's actually mechuten with both. I know he's mechuten with Reb Aaron, and I think also with Reb Zalman Leib is also a mechuten. So that's just and he doesn't have a shul in Orange County. This rabbi, he spends the summer in Rockland County and lives in Williamsburg. Now, just getting back to what we're discussing with these things. So why am I bringing this up now? So there was a controversy, as we mentioned, about Steve Newhouse. I don't remember what his opponent's name was, but it should be noted that in Curious Joel, as far as I know, neither side endorsed a candidate for county executive. Steve Newhouse is the county executive of Orange County, and Steve Newhouse won a majority. It wasn't an overwhelming majority, but he won a majority in Curious Joel. So all of these things saying, so like I'm reading this article, and it's kind of going against Steve Newhouse. But the fact of the matter is that, and it's trying to paint Steve Newhouse as being anti-Hasidic, but the fact of the matter is, Curious Joel gave no particular block vote, and they didn't endorse any particular candidate, and there are voter guides that are distributed like many churches do, and they're distributed by separate political action committee, not by the congregation that's nonprofit, and so that balances the Johnson Amendment, whatever, rescues the it spares that violation. But the fact of the matter is, I feel it's very unfair to bring this up about Steve Newhouse. And coming from a media source like Times Herald Record, my feeling is that there's something very it's just feeding into the regular anti-Republican hysteria that's happening now from the left, from the media, and from other sources, because Steve Newhouse happens to be a Republican. Because it's very plain and simple that Steve Newhouse is not anti-Hasidic, and it seems that what I would assume, and I don't have any knowledge of this is just my theory, is that Steve Newhouse asked the Hasidic community to kind of go along with this whole charade, which was useful politically for him, and to vote for him without giving him the endorsement, because he felt that it would politically damage his chances elsewhere. And that's politics. You can talk about how moral that is politically, but there's certain wisdom in politics. And politics can be a dirty game. So I think I think it's unfair. Now, to be honest, though, it's in his favor to paint himself as opposing the Hasidic community. I mean, it's just a reality, but the Hasidic community in general will vote based on who's going to win. That's generally, meaning in the local elections, the Hasidic community does have power. But in larger elections, even on the county level, they really don't have that much power. However, they have a lot of visibility. And so in local elections, they'll usually wield power for a particular purpose. Sometimes, usually, sometimes trying to endorse a candidate that they want to win, and sometimes showing gratitude to a candidate that they know will lose. That's also, because they do feel that there is a certain morality, and gratitude is a major value in the Hasidic community and Jewish community. And so there have been times where the Curious Joe will give the block vote to a losing candidate that they know will lose in order to show gratitude. That's particularly when, for example, United Monroe has made coalitions together with the B'nai Ol, I forgot what they call these different groups. There's Anash and KJ Alliance. I don't remember. I think Anash is the Barn, and KJ Alliance is the B'nai Ol. I don't remember. But that being said, meaning they will, there have been cases like that. But on the other hand, there have been cases where, in general, and especially on the county and the state level, they will give their block vote to whoever's going to win, whether or not their values line up with them. And now, in general, most likely the values of Curious Joe are more similar to the values of Steve Newhouse, of a Republican. I don't really know that much about him. I don't know how conservative he is, social issues and so forth. And those type of things usually are not a major issue on the county level, even though really those are the issues that should be on the more local county and state level, as opposed to being nationalized the way they have been recently. However, I think there's a much bigger threat from the hysteria of the left than there is from the right, meaning, why is this, meaning these issues attacking the Hasidic community have been going on for a long time, but the reason why this forum, I think, is being staged now is because Steve Newhouse is a Republican, because it's not the Hasidic community that's doing this, it's the left-wing, Jewish Federation and the left-wing Southern Poverty Law Center. So, and I'm more concerned with the type of bigotry against conservatives that we see today, the type of hatred and rhetoric we see against the president, that people will call, the president Hitler when he has a Jewish daughter. Like, I don't get it, So, it's really offensive and sickening that people will do that. So, and I'm not a big fan. I really wanted Ted Cruz to win, and I only really felt comfortable voting for Trump because he had Pence on the ticket. Because Trump, I feel, is too much to the left, and he's really, I kind of felt like he's a Democrat in Republicans' clothing. But he's been doing better than I thought. And that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. I did want to talk about the Jerusalem issue, but I think I'm going to leave that for now because I'm almost to work and I don't have time to talk. But these are basically what I wanted to say here, is that I think instead of attacking Steve Newhouse, who really doesn't deserve to be attacked, and probably, even though I really wouldn't have said this in the forum, but probably made some kind of a deal with the Hasidic community, we should really be more focused on the threats from the left. And we should remember historically that the KKK is part of the Democrat Party and really still has connections to the Democrat Party if you really look into it, but they're small and insignificant, so it's not really what to talk about. Certainly the left-wing groups that ironically call themselves the alt-right, have much more in common with Democrats than they do have with Republicans, sociologically, ideologically, and so forth. And that's really what we should be focused on, rather than and the hysteria against the president, who's really a middle of the line person, middle of the road person. This is a president whose values are much more in line with, especially on social issues, with the left. He's probably the most pro-gay president we've ever had, and it's just the reality of the times we live in. And yet, it seems that, the Republicans were willing to cross the aisle, so to speak, to vote for President Trump for the good of the country. And you would think that Democrats should be happy that here we have a president who's extremely pro-gay, extremely left-wing in his social ideas. And yet they hate him just because, for no reason, really, just because it was Hillary's turn and he upset that. And there's really nothing about President Trump for the left to dislike. There are plenty of things for the right to dislike, but really nothing for the left to dislike about him. All right. Well, God bless you. Please like, share, and subscribe. And yet the right are open-minded enough to accept him, because there are certain issues that are more important, and the left is not willing to budge. It's pretty scary, and that's what I think is the real threat here, and it's manifested on the local level in these groups that are fighting the Hasidic community. It's a microcosm of a bigger issue. All right. Well, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I look forward to talking to you. Be well.